Hey everyone, welcome to AMC Mailbag, the all mailbag show here on AMC Movie News. What all we do is take your questions. I'm Ashley Mova, and if you've got a burning question that you want answered on air, you can send it over.
So many burning questions.
So many. I know that you go through a lot of them. You can send it over anytime to amcmovietalk@gmail.com. You get answered on Mailbag or Movie Talk. And sitting with me to answer those questions is the editor-in-chief of AMC Movie News, Mr. John Campia.
Hello, everybody. Greetings. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
How was your Christmas break?
Oh, it was fabulous, but it feels good to be back. I'm not going to lie.
Did you do anything special? Did you travel? Did you go anywhere?
I did. Oh my gosh, I can't even think right now. You're putting me on the spot. I did. I went to San Francisco. That's where I went. Lots of hills. Nice. Lots of hills. Yes. Exhausting, tiring to walk. I don't know. Did you do anything?
I did the best thing ever. I went back home. I went to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I went to the Chappie Ranch. For those of you who follow me on Facebook or whatever, you know I put up a whole bunch of pictures there at the ranch.
That's so classy, by the way.
It's the Chappie Ranch. Got to go four-wheeling through the property, hang out with the horses and the dogs and all the animals. It was really cool. But one really cool thing happened. This is now nobody else is going to find this funny. I thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world. You got to understand, my grandfather Giovanni, who I am named after because my real name's Giovanni, but my grandfather Giovanni, he came over from Italy with his young family because it was employment in Italy at the time was really, really hard. He wanted to build a better life for his kids and his family, so he brought them over. Now, shortly after he came over, his four brothers came with him. Now, this is how Italian my family is, okay? My grandfather is Giovanni. My dad is Pasquale. But my grandfather's brothers are Carlo, Romolo, Vincenzo, and, Carlo, Romolo, Vincenzo, and I'm forgetting the fourth brother right now. Anyway.
Hopefully they're not watching.
So all the brothers came over with him, right? After that. And let's just say that there are certain Italian stereotypes, that there are stereotypes because there's a reason for it. Anyway, and there are, me and my siblings have always speculated about my grandfather's background and his brothers. Anyway, that being said, my sister was telling this great story. My sister's married to this nice guy named Dayn. And my great uncle Carlo, my grandfather's brother, was very close with my dad and his siblings, and therefore very close with his kids. And so he loved my sister. And you gotta understand, Carlo was a big man. He's passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a big man, a big Italian, as stereotype as they get, right? With all these old Italian brothers, the family with him, right? And so, Dan and my sister get engaged. I know that I'm sorry. We'll get to the movie questions in a second, but Dan and my sister get engaged. I just love the story. And, he goes up to Dan. And he says, it's nice you get married to Sandy. And everybody's like, yeah. Dan's like, yeah, that's great. He goes, good, but, you would be good to her. She my little girl. And they're like, okay, yeah. Because if you were not good to her, bang, bang. Huh? Bang, bang. And so at that point, Dan is just like, okay. And so that's his sweet great uncle Carlo.
Yeah, you got to protect the girls.
I'm sorry, but we all just laughed our asses off when she was telling us her and Dan told that story of Christmas. Anyway, long and the short.
It's cute.
I got to spend time with my family. I very rarely get time to spend with my family. So it was so great. Love Christmas. I hope all of you guys had a great Christmas, New Year's. I know a lot of you have been sending a lot of emails and Facebook messages and Twitter saying how much you've missed AMC Movie News, but we are back.
We're back. And Happy New Year.
And ready to go.
All right, let's start with Tarra McGivens, and she writes, or he writes, Tarra, I'm not sure. Hey, AMCers, I read that Justin Lin is now going to be directing the next Star Trek movie. Is this true? If so, what do you think about the decision? Do you think he'll do a better job than Roberto Orci would have? Thanks.
I think this is probably going to be one of the topics we cover on AMC Movie Talk when it comes back on Monday. But yeah, let's address it here. Okay, first of all, is hiring Justin Lin a good decision? I think so. I think understanding that the contemporary Star Trek franchise is not just a sci-fi franchise, and it is a sci-fi franchise, but it's also an action-adventure franchise now, more than the original series was. And understanding that it has become a sci-fi action-adventure thing, Justin Lin is almost as good as it gets right now. Look, he made the 3 watchable Fast and the Furious movies, 4, 5, and 6. I thought 4 was pretty good. It's the first one that I didn't think was total garbage. 5, I thought was great. 6, I lost my mind. I thought was spectacular. He's turned, for me personally, a garbage franchise into a must-watch franchise. And that's impressive, what he's done there. But, he also did this little film that I know a lot of people didn't like, Annapolis, with James Franco, and speaking of Fast and the Furious, I think it's Tyrese who did that with him. Anyway, which I actually thought was a nice little film. I know a lot of people didn't like it, and that's fine, but I thought it was a nice little film. And he's directing the new season of True Detective, which has put that on a lot of people's radar, which is probably going to be more narrative-driven than action. So you put all of that together, is Justin Lin my number one choice to direct Star Trek? Maybe not. But it's one of those directors' names that, one of 15 directors, if you'd pick that guy, would go, good choice. So I think it's a good choice. Now, on to the second part of the question of, do we think he'll do a better job than Roberto Orci? Yeah, he'll do a better job than Roberto Orci. Why? Because we've seen Justin Lin direct good, fun films before, and Roberto Orci has never directed anything. And it hurts me to say that because unapologetically, I am a Roberto Orci fan. I like Roberto Orci. And yeah, sure, he's written some films that are no good, but he's written some films that are really good. And as a producer, he's done some really cool stuff too. But I was always trepidatious about him directing Star Trek. I never thought it was... Star Trek is not a good film to be your first movie, Do something smaller for, his writing partner, Alex Kurtzman, he did a couple of smaller little films. Fact checker, the movie that Kurtzman directed that starred Chris Pine and Elizabeth, what's Elizabeth's last name from the Hunger Games? Elizabeth
Banks.
Banks, thank you. Elizabeth Banks. It was a cute little love story. I can't remember the title of it, but if you can look it up and do you got it? No. Not yet, but look it up. But Kurtzman started with a much smaller film. He's Orci's writing partner, and it turned out great, and then he's been progressing since. And that's what I'd like to see Roberto Orci do. So, yes, Justin Lin's a good choice, and yes, he will. I have very little doubt that he'll do better than Roberto Orci would have.
With these huge franchises, it's almost like with any franchise, regardless of Star Trek, but Star Trek fans are die hard, you know? And with huge franchises, I feel like some fans are going to complain about any person chosen. Sure. Why is that?
I think it's because, look, I say it all the time, the most wonderful thing about film is the subjectivity of it. We all watch a film and we'll all see different things because it's art. So it'll hit us differently. When you start talking now about a franchise that is beloved, that means everybody's got an opinion as to what is best for that franchise they love. And you could say, we are getting the DNA of Alfred Hitchcock, of Stanley Kubrick, and of Steven Spielberg, and creating one mega clone who will be the ultimate director of all time, and he will direct the new Star Trek, and you will still get some Star Trek fans that will complain. That's not a negative reflection on Star Trek fans.
Right,
I'm talking about any popular franchise. You will get some people that will complain about it. And so I'm sure some people are going to complain about Justin Lin. I'm sure there are some people that other people wanted. But also, here's the other thing with us film fans. We get a name in our head, right? About who should star in this or who should direct this. And we never allow ourselves to think outside of that box. Like I said, I don't think Justin Lin would have been my number one choice. But outside of my number one choice, there would probably be about 10 or 15 names that are like, hey, maybe he's not the guy I would have got, but getting any of these guys, good choice, right? But a lot of film fans are like, I want Peter Jackson to direct Star Trek, and if it's anybody else other than Peter Jackson, they will stomp their feet and complain. That's what we do as film fans. We love to stomp our feet and complain, so it's just in our nature.
Okay. Filip writes, hey AMC, been a huge fan for years. I saw the last bracket competition and was a huge fan of it. Next, you said you would do an animated bracket. I love that idea, but you never got to it. Can it happen soon? You would probably mention many animated movies I have not seen that I would have to see then. Thanks, and get going with the brackets and keep up the great work.
Yeah, when he's talking about the brackets, for those who don't know, last year, around February, I guess, we did a March Madness tournament for best comic book movies of all time. And Dennis, I can't remember. Did we start with 64 or 32? I got a feeling. 32. Yeah, we started with 32, 16 in each bracket. And we wanted to do more this past year, but it was a lot of work, it turned out, doing that bracket. But we are going to do another one. The next one up is going to be the tournament for best animated film of all time. And we're going to go 64. We're gonna go.
Okay.
We're gonna have a field of 64 this year, and I think our two divisions will be. I think it's going to be the Disney division and the Pixar division. I'm not sure. We'll figure out the names for the divisions. Doesn't really matter for the two brackets, and we'll go around. And I'm looking forward to that a lot. But it's funny because we did that in February, and that's coming up. That was almost a year ago.
That's depressing how fast time goes.
No kidding. And look, I'm going to go on a rabbit trail for a second here. This week, it was 1 year ago this week that we did the 24-hour Philippine Disaster Relief Marathon. The 24-hour marathon. Think about this, how fast time flies, guys. For those of you who've been watching us for this long. That was a year ago. It was a year ago that Dennis and I walked up on a stage in Las Vegas. Yep. Me and Dennis walked up on a stage in Las Vegas at the Academy of Web Television Awards when AMC Movie Talk was awarded with the best online news series. We beat out some big competition. This thing's almost a year old now. Anyway, I sleep with this thing at night. No, not really. But that was a year ago. So yeah, the bracket was a year ago. The next one's coming up. We'll probably do it in February sometime.
Okay.
But we haven't totally decided this yet, but unlike last year when we made a part of AMC Movie Talk dedicated to the brackets, I think the brackets are going to be their own videos.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
and so people have their own videos they can just tune in and watch if they just want to watch the bracket stuff. So I'm excited about it very much.
Michael Walls writes, "Hey guys, love this show. I would love to know your thoughts of Chappie and its trailer. I, for one, loved it and cannot wait to see it."
Chappie is a very interesting film. It's being directed by Neil Blomkamp, who directed District 9, and who also then later on directed Elysium. And a lot of people have been very excited about it because it's a Neil Blomkamp film. The guy who directed District 9, I love District 9. I think a lot of us do. I am not so excited about it. I'm not looking forward to it. But I'll be honest with you. I watched the trailer, and the trailer didn't do anything for me. It really didn't. The one kind of I'm not thrilled with the casting in it either. I don't like that they're going for music stars instead of like proven, not even, doesn't necessarily have to be movie actors, but like people who have some stage experience or have a background of acting, even if we don't know who they are, that's fine. But he's going for music talent. Okay. Hugh Jackman, though, is the one shining light on the cast. And I guess he's playing the villain, and I'm so excited to see him play the villain in that. And I think he's playing Blackbeard in the new Peter Pan movie. That's going to be really cool to see him play bad guys. But Elysium was awful. It was awful. I wanted to love that movie so much. A lot of people wanted to love that movie so much because it was a Neil Blomkamp, his follow-up film to District 9. But it wasn't good. There were some good things about it. It wasn't a legendarily stinker of a film, but it was not good. And it felt to me, plot point by plot point, it felt like a carbon copy of District 9 to me. Kate, there's a guy who, so whether it's, I can't remember the good guy character's name in the phrase, like some Mekus or Phoebus or whatever his name was, in the first one. And then you got the Matt Damon character in the second one. And they both follow the same kind of character path. Something happens to them. That was beyond their control. They exposed to the alien goo, getting exposed to the radiation, having to have the metal things put in them. So they get altered in such a way that wasn't part of their original thing. It was beyond their control. They get altered in such a way that makes them very valuable to the government. Now the government is hunting each of them, and each of them have a people group's lives and future in their hands, depending on what they do. Like, it just felt like a carbon copy of District 9, right? And then I watch the trailer for Chappie, and it just feels like I think the story is different, but it completely feels like District 9 again. It feels like Elysium. And I'd love to see Blomkamp, who clearly has some directing genius in him. I'd love to see him branch out from this very tiny little sliver niche that he's just kind of put himself in, and he's just living in that niche. I'd like to see him expand beyond that a bit. So look, I may see Elysium or Chappie and think it's the greatest thing ever. And I'm totally open to that. I'm very curious to watch it. But because of Elysium and the feel of the trailer, I cannot be excited for it. So it's nowhere near my most anticipated film of the year list.
You mentioned while you were talking about how there's a musician in there. What do you think about musicians turned as actors, and has anyone ever successfully done that in your opinion?
Mark.
Oh, okay.
Mark Wahlberg has done, but Mark Wahlberg, I believe, is the prototype, the blueprint, if you will, for what you should do to do it right. Which is, read up on Wahlberg and what he did. When he decided he wanted to go into acting, he dedicated himself to acting. For years, he hired on the best trainers, the best everything, and slowly, over years and years and years and years, as he took one or two bigger roles that was a mistake, but then he did some smaller stuff, and then ultimately he got an Academy Award nomination for The Departed, and now he's a go-to guy. Unfortunately, what we've seen in the past, and it doesn't happen so often anymore because people have seen how tragic it can be, they'll just take a music star because, hey, they're a music star. Hey, it's Rihanna. Yeah. She's hot. Let's put her in Battleship. That'll make it great, right? Wrong. That became one of the dozens of things
sometimes it takes you out of it more than completely. Attracts you to it. Yeah.
And it becomes so, especially like Rihanna, who I'm a big fan of Rihanna's music, but it was painful watching her in that movie. She was terrible because she didn't have the background. She didn't do what Mark Wahlberg did.
Right.
So can it work? Absolutely, it can. It's just that it's happened so rarely because very rarely do you got to get a guy like Wahlberg who, if you're a fan of his or not, commit themselves to it and say, I'm not going to do this overnight. This is going to take time. And they dedicate themselves to it and they grow in it. And, we haven't seen Mark Wahlberg waffle and start going, well, maybe I should release a new album now. Marky Mark returns, He hasn't done that. He has stuck to it. He's committed to it. And I think it can still work in the future.
Yeah, good for him. Dayn writes, hi AMC, love the show and watch it every day. I was wondering, why is it so easy to put superheroes together in comics, like when DC and Marvel made a crossover, but so hard to get them together in movies? Thanks and bring on the filthy.
Yeah, because we've seen, like, for instance, in every comic book title in Marvel, Spider-Man will show up in everybody's comic. Yeah. The Fantastic Four will show up in everybody's comic. The Avengers will show up in everybody's comic. Because you can do that, right? Because it's the comic universe. We've even said, like he mentioned, we've seen several instances when Marvel and DC have gotten together and done these giant event crossovers, right? But there's several reasons why it's infinitely more difficult to do that for movies. But the two most important ones are this, is that in the movie world, the stakes are much higher. We've gone over before on this show about how many comic books are actually sold. Not a lot. Okay. Like the Fantastic Four, I believe the last month that they were in print, I believe they sold like 26,000 comics, which means, wrap your head around this, more people are going to watch this episode of AMC Mailbag than will read Fantastic Four. That's crazy, but it's the truth. A lot of these comics sell 50,000, 75,000. The really big ones will sell like maybe 100,000 comics, whatever. But, the stakes are much, much, much smaller. How much does it cost to put out an issue of a comic book? Not that much. Okay. However, you're talking about a movie universe. You're not just talking about single movies anymore either, because a single movie can cost $200 million just to put one movie together, right? But you're no longer just talking about one movie. You're talking about franchises. You're putting billion-dollar franchises, multiple billion-dollar franchises on the line. The Batman franchise was killed by a bad Batman movie. That George Clooney, Arnold Schwarzenegger, let's kick some ice, like that, killed. Not only killed the Batman franchise, it killed, for a number of years, it killed the comic book genre. And so, if you put out a stinker of a comic book, what did we lose? Okay. Next to nothing. You put out a stinker of a comic book movie, the stakes are just infinitely, you destroy companies with one huge bomb. Yeah. On that level. So there's that. But the other thing is, in the comic book world, it is so easy because the readers are so used to doing simple throwaway one-shots. Like Elseworld comics, right? So you can put out a not an Avengers, but a Marvel DC crossover story that's like 3 issues. But just tell your readers, this doesn't actually affect the real comic book world. This is just a fantasy one-shot. The studios don't want to do that. Studios don't want to, they're building franchises. They don't want to invest $200 million in a movie that's just a one-off throwaway movie that has no impact on everything else. So the stakes are higher. In the printed universe, it's far easier to do a throwaway Elseworld story that just stands alone and stands on its own. And you're talking about influence. We talk about this all the time. I won't go into it again, but if you're going to have Batman and the Avengers in the same movie, then who gets final say over what the dialogue is? Does Warner Brothers get final say, or does Marvel get final say? Who gets final say? Warner Brothers goes, you know what? In this scene between Iron Man and Batman and Bruce Wayne, we think Bruce Wayne should have the cool line in that. Yeah. And Kevin Feige goes, no, we think Tony Stark should have the cool line in that scene. That's just one line. They'd never get together. Yeah. And I won't go into the whole that thing again, but that's generally why it's a lot easier to do crossovers in comics than it is in the movie
That definitely makes sense. But why are people so friggin' obsessed with this happening? It's almost like they know it's not going to happen. So we literally get questions about this every day. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with it. It's like they know it's not going to happen, so it becomes more of a want.
Yeah, I think it's a fantasy thing, right? It's a big fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, it would be exciting, but
it's exciting for the novelty. See, I keep having this argument with friends of mine. Like, I'm a big fan of the Spider-Man franchise. I'm obviously a big fan of the Avengers franchise. But I personally don't want Spider-Man in an Avengers movie. That's stupid. I love those two individual characters. Why does everything have to be crossed over? Everybody whines and complains. I've never once been given an adequate answer to this. Everybody whines and complains as soon as anybody's added to a movie. They're overcrowding it. Too many characters, blah, blah. But we've got the Avengers asylum, like 8 people big. Let's add Spider-Man. Let's add Wolverine. Let's add this. And like, why? What's the point? How much screen? Do you really want to see Spider-Man neutered? Because he's going to get no screen. He's going to get very little screen time. He's going to get one movie every 5 years because Marvel is just, their docket is just so packed. And Sony has proved they can do great Spider-Man movies. We've had great Spider-Man movies. So I will never understand. Look, what I do get is that fantasy fanboyism that I share too. I would love to see Spider-Man and Iron Man fighting side by side. That would be cool. But that's cool for a scene. That's cool for a fan film. For long term, I like Spider-Man having his own universe without a billion other superheroes running around in it. And I like the Avengers having their own universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That even I'm starting to feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe may be getting a little overcrowded, but we'll see where that goes. But that's just the way I see it.
Well, speaking of Spider-Man, we've got a question from Justin Russell, and he writes, I realize we've all been talking about the whole will Spider-Man go back to Marvel question for years now, but good idea or bad, regardless of how soon or how long, will Spidey ever go back to Marvel? Thoughts?
I have said for a long time that all other things being equal, Sony would be fools to let Spider-Man go. He is... Regardless of what anything you hear people say, which is all nonsense, Spider-Man is the most profitable franchise that studio has. It is the best, biggest money-making thing they have. Why would they let him go? And number 2, Marvel is making money hand over fist without Spider-Man. They don't need to pay Sony $1 billion or however many billions of dollars to get Spider-Man back. Because why? What do they need him for? They put out Guardians of the freaking Galaxy and it's the #1 box office movie of the year. They don't need Spider-Man and they know it. But that was a year ago. Today, we're not living in an all other things being equal universe. Sony is a company that is now in a mess. And I'm not just talking about the movie studio part. Sony as a company as a whole is in a mess and is in trouble. And I mean, all the hack leaks and all that kind of stuff, just adding to the turmoil over there. We are no longer living in an all other things being equal universe. Now we're in a world where I don't think it's so far-fetched for Sony to ditch their entire movie division. That sounds radical. I know that sounds completely way out there and way extreme. But we're now, and I wouldn't bet on it, but we're living in a world now where if we found out tomorrow that Sony was just cutting and just shutting down their whole movie division, I wouldn't keel over from shock anymore. All that being said, I believe we are now living in a world where it is, I'll use the word inevitable. I believe it is inevitable that eventually Sony, Spider-Man in particular, will find his way back to Marvel through a license lapse. I just think it's like the way Daredevil went back. Marvel didn't go out and buy Daredevil back. They just let the lease on him expire, and it defaulted back to them. I believe Sony at some point is going to be positioned. Now, whether that is 10 years from now or 20 years from now, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but if you're asking the question, no matter how long or soon, will it eventually happen? I got to say that it's eventually going to happen. Things look too bleak for Sony right now, but I hope it doesn't. Mm-hmm. I'm the type of guy I want Spider-Man in his own universe. Yeah. I think Sony, yes, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a disappointment, but I think I will argue with anybody. I think The Amazing Spider-Man 1 was a great film. I thought it was really good. The first Sam Raimi Spider-Man was a great film. Spider-Man 2 with Sam Raimi was a great film. Mm-hmm. I think they have more great Spider-Man films than not great Spider-Man films. I want to see them keep doing it, but yeah, I think we live in a world now that it's inevitable. Eventually he'll go back.
While we're on the subject of Spider-Man, yes. I know you hated The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I didn't hate it. I didn't.
I feel like you hated it.
Everybody else hated it. Everybody,
I feel like everybody hated it. He hated it so much.
Snap hated The Amazing
like
Spider-Man 2.
After he saw it, was like, this was ridiculous.
I think he calls it spider poop or something like that. The Amazing Spider Poop. He's so bad on it.
So many people hated it.
I actually enjoyed it.
Okay.
But even as somebody who enjoyed it, I'll sit down and say, yep, there were a million things wrong with that movie. A million things wrong. It was a big disappointment to me. Even though I still came out having had a good time. It was a big disappointment to me. So I didn't hate the film, but a big disappointment.
Right. Maybe because I'm not technically looking at things, and Spider-Man's definitely my favorite superhero. I love his story out of everyone. I cried in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 when Gwen
dies?
Well, spoiler
alert. Look, if you haven't seen the movie by now and you haven't rented it on DVD by now, then you're clearly not all that interested in it. So whatever. Yeah,
when she died, I cried my eyes out. So
did Anne.
I could not stop. It was like ridiculous. I was like, why am I so invested in this? But I heard a rumor, emphasis on rumor, that Gwen Stacy would be coming back for The Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Nah. I think if anything, they may do. I wouldn't doubt if we saw Emma Stone in like a flashback scene or two. If they brought her back to do something like that. Kind of like the way they brought her dad back for some flashback scenes. But I don't think we're going to see her resurrected from the dead. And some people go, well, John, in the comics. Yes, I understand. But no, that's not their plan. Their plan is to move. Now, Peter Parker, look, who knows what they're going to do with Spider-Man now. But the plan was that they were now going to move in the direction of Spider-Man's his destiny, his destiny's true love, which was Mary Jane. But then that got all messed up too. But no, as far as I know,
gosh, you're just breaking my heart.
No
over
plans
here.
to bring Gwen Stacy back.
Womp womp. Okay. Tom Biddiscombe writes, I was wondering, now that we have all seen Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, which do you prefer, the films or the book? I personally prefer the book because, in my opinion, apart from Ian McKellen as Gandalf and Martin Freeman as Bilbo, I do not think the characters are adapted that well. It is very much a prequel to Lord of the Rings rather than an adaptation of Tolkien's Hobbit. And I feel Bilbo is sidelined too often. What are your thoughts?
Very close for me. I actually really do quite enjoy the movies. And while the movies have not and will not moving forward make as big of an impact on me as the book did originally, I'm going to say the movies. I'm going to be in the minority on that. Okay. I know I'm going to be in the minority on that, but I believe it goes beyond just Martin Freeman as Bilbo and Ian McKellen as Gandalf. I think Richard Armitage as Thorin Oakenshield carried that franchise. And I said from the beginning, once you watch that first movie, you realize this is going to be a story. And really, when you read the book, this is a story about Thorin. It really is. At the heart of it, this is a story about Thorin. And I said that from the very first movie, and we saw that throughout the second and the third. And Bilbo, the Hobbit, is really like the chronicler. This story is being kind of told from his perspective, but it's not his story per se. You know, as we get into Lord of the Rings, you kind of see the whole scope of Lord of the Rings maybe as Bilbo's story. Even though he's not very present in the Lord of the Rings films, it's still, he becomes a centric figure because he's the one who got the ring, So I think he did a very, very good job. I think Armitage was a great Thorin Oakenshield. And do I think Bilbo was sidelined? He was a little bit sidelined, but once again, to me, that was because the story was being told from his perspective, but it wasn't his story. Mm-hmm. It starts with him, but it becomes very clear that this is a story about Thorin Oakenshield and the dwarves and reclaiming their homeland and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go with the movies, mm-hmm. but I'm not going to put up an argument against anybody who wants to argue for the book, because there are many, 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 many good arguments to be mm-hmm. made for saying that the book was better that I can't refute. I'm just going to say, for me personally, in my experience, I'm going to lean towards the movies, even though they won't have as long of an impacting effect on me as the book did. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say the movies.
Do you think when there is a popular movie and a popular book that the order in which you read them or the order in which you see the movie affects your opinion of it? Because there are a ton of movies that people are like, oh, it just didn't live up to the picture I had in my mind. That happens all the time.
Yeah, it completely does. And, I've got a rule about movies that have books out. Mm-hmm. If I know a movie's coming out and there's a book to it, mm-hmm. I will not read the book first.
Okay.
Just won't do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want my own head and my own imagination to spoil what I think the movie should be. Mm-hmm. I want to watch the movie and watch it for the movie.
Yeah.
And not with any pre-existing expectations or whatever. And if I happen to have already read the book like I did with The Hobbit, mm-hmm. so be it. But that's my personal rule.
Okay. Raven Chow writes, hi, I'm a big fan of the show. I was wondering if we could see a sequel to Nightcrawler. I would love to revisit the Lou Bloom character.
I love Nightcrawler. I wish more people had seen it. I think there's probably still playing out there somewhere. If you get a chance to see Nightcrawler, go see it. Jake Gyllenhaal, one of the absolute powerhouse performances mm-hmm. of the year. Rene Russo is awesome. Rene Russo is getting overlooked for her role in this film because Jake Gyllenhaal gives the best performance of his career in it too. It's a great movie. It's thrilling. I was excited the whole way through. It's character driven. It's just a fantastic movie. No way is there going to be a sequel. Okay. Nor should they be. I mean, if you watch the movie, this character's journey, and really the movie is about Lou. It's played out. By the time you get to the end of the film, his story is played out. Now, you could say to me, but John, you could pick it up here, and you could. But just because you coulda doesn't mean you shoulda. Yeah. I just don't think it would be a good move. I think the character's now done. It's played out. It played out perfectly and gave us a great movie. I don't see where you can go with it, really. That makes really good sense. And clearly, the box office results are not good and do not demand a sequel either. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there should be one, and I don't think there could be one either. So I think both ways we look at it, no, I don't think we're going to see a sequel.
What would you say is would be the final decision? Like, how many more months, how many more weeks? If we don't hear about it, that's not going to happen.
I think the decision's been made. I mean, it's made all the money it's going to make, and it's not a lot. And I think, like I said, I think if there were some clearly obvious things where you need to go with this guy's mm-hmm. character in his development, I'd say, yeah, maybe you might want to take a shot at it, but I don't see that either. This movie wraps up so perfectly. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like we need to revisit Lou. I feel like it's perfect the way it is, and anything else would just be stretching it a lot.
Okay.
And once again, then look, if this movie made $100 million, mm-hmm. none of that would matter. The studio would make a sequel, but they didn't, so it's not even up for question.
Fair enough. Max Ganter writes, hey AMC, love the show and was wondering, we often see these movies about wars from recent times. Most of them are very good, but why haven't we really seen a story told from the Revolutionary War? I've been learning a lot about it in school and I find it interesting. Some might say it's boring, but why can't there be a movie? Paul Giamatti was in a mini-series on Netflix called John Adams. Check it out. I think it's great and a movie of some kind should be made. What are your thoughts? Thanks.
I mean, it's one of those things where can they come up with a story that can be told within that context that makes for a good movie? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think if they have a really powerful script in front of them, they can make it. But one of the questions that they have to put in front of themselves is not only can it be a good movie, is this a movie that people would go to see? Mm-hmm. Now, when you're talking about wars, if you want to go back, I mean, the Civil War is a far more, this is a terrible word to use, but for lack of a better word, it's a far more sexy war, right? Because it's the war that
Last word I expected you to use.
Sexy. It's the war that pits brother against brother. It's the war that pitted father against son and neighbor against neighbor in a time that completely, revolutionized and kind of defined what America was going to be. And then you throw into that the issues of slavery and the issues of, I mean, there's so many things that go into it. Now, not to say that the Civil War doesn't have that. It absolutely does. And that's why you can get like, movies like, the Paul Giamatti Adams, I think it was, which was very good, by the way. I watched that on Netflix. And it was really, really good. There's The Patriot, if you want to watch that, with, Mel Gibson, which is actually pretty good. And if you're a fan of the Joker, it's also got, who played the Joker? Yeah. Was that? Heath Ledger. I believe Heath Ledger plays like Mel Gibson's son in that movie. So it's not one of the best Mel Gibson movies, but a good one. So they have done it. But like I said, if you want to go for a period piece, war in old America, you tend to lean towards the Civil War because there's so many more things going on there. But I got to think, like, what year was The Patriot? I think The Patriot was like 2000. Thank you. It was 2000. So we're talking almost 15 years ago. So it's time. I would be interested in seeing a Revolutionary War movie, but, you know, it's about the studio having the right script, a good story, and do they think this is one people will go to see? I think if you're a studio exec and you've got two great scripts, one's about the Civil War, one's about the Revolutionary War, you're probably going to lead towards the Civil War one, but I'd be up for seeing a good Revolutionary War film.
Any other moment in history you think a film should be made of? That
they should really do. A great moment in history that maybe hasn't already been done to death. Boy, I don't know. I mean, I'm really fascinated by the history of the wars between England and France.
Okay.
So I'm always a sucker for, even when The Tudors was on TV, I went back on Netflix and watched the whole thing of Tudors. I didn't watch it when it was on TV because I didn't really get it. So then one day I was home and I just started watching The Tudors. I'm like, all right, this is what I want to see. And I watched a lot about that. I think that's part of the reason why I'm a big fan of like almost any incarnation of the Three Musketeers, other than the one that they just did with Mila Jovovich and Luke Evans, and all. That movie was wretchedly awful. They even had Christoph Waltz playing like Cardinal Vishnu or something. It's like, it was just terrible. It had Christoph Waltz in it and was awful. But yeah, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So I would love to see like a really good film on the historic wars between England and France. I think that would be fascinating to see.
Well, I think that is our last question of the day. Okay. Thanks guys so much for watching. Just a reminder, lots of great movies being shown in AMC theaters today. So go ahead and check out www.amctheaters.com for all of your theaters, showtimes, and movie ticket info. Also, make sure you check out the description box below for a link to our podcast, and make sure you click that subscribe button. Thanks to the guys in the room, Dennis and Jonathan. And of course, thanks to the editor-in-chief of AMC Movie News, John. Where can people find you online?
You guys can find me on all the various social media networks on the internets, at Facebook and on Twitter, at John Campia.
And you can also find me on the interwebs, Twitter and Instagram at Ashley Movan. Thanks again so much for joining us, guys, and we will catch you on the next episode of AMC Mailbag. Bye-bye.